I tell you who's ruined music. Artsy fartsy types. People who are stuck up, who think they're intellectuals, who think their opinion is better than others people's opinion. You know, those types of snotty types. And when I was at school, they were the types who were all trendy and they liked all the latest stuff and they were cool and everybody liked them. And there was me in the corner. I didn't quite fit in. I don't know why, I just didn't. Right? And those types, they always like the good stuff. And then February 1980, on the radio I hear All Night Long by Rainbow. Now, those lyrics might have been questionable and misogynistic, but I didn't care. All I cared about is, to me, Cozy Powell looked cool on the drums, that Richie Blackmore looked cool on guitar, and it had some rocking riffs. I, at the age of 12, was drawn in to the visceral wonder of rock music like we all were. I love a good riff. Now, I've got known on this channel for, I suppose, championing prog and jazz rock fusion, all the sorts of virtuoso, complex, deeply emotional, but at the same time incredibly technical music that those sort of artsy fartsy snotty types, they never like that, do they? They find they don't trust it. They don't like it. They probably don't like it deep down, and it's the thing you can't say, because they're not musically literate enough to understand it. But when they come across something they don't understand, they can never admit the fact that they don't understand it, can they? Oh no, those types cannot. No, they cannot. So they put it down. Oh, it's overindulgent. It's like musical masturbation, they say. Why are you bringing that up, I ask myself. So at a young age, I saw through these people and I was drawn into this very untrendy but very exciting world of heavy metal. And for the rest of my life, I have loved heavy metal. I love heavy metal, right? What I didn't like was the stuff that these artsy-fartsy intellectuals had as their heavy metal. They didn't have heavy metal. When they started to talk about visceral rock and roll, they started to talk about people like Neil Young and the Ramones and the Clash and stuff like that. And I thought, they don't rock. Have you got no ears? Clean your ears out. AC/DC rock, Judas Priest rock, okay? I love heavy metal, right? Now, even though I love heavy metal, as the history of heavy metal has carried on since 1970 with the release of the Black Sabbath debut album, in the last 55 years, it's changed and transmuted, and it's had its good points and its bad points. And over those decades, me, who is a lover of heavy metal, I love heavy metal. There is a lot of things that now I don't. In fact, I would go as far to say I hate. On this video, I'm going to go through the 10 reasons why I hate modern metal. Oh, you guys love these, don't you? So, you ready for some hate? So, should we just kick straight in? All right, so here we're going to have a list of 10 specific things. I'm going to talk about them specifically, but please remember that any of these things on their own, I don't mind. You know, they're minor details. They're symptoms of something much greater. And what is much greater is the taking on of metal by those artsy-fartsy, snotty types. Okay? That sort of postmodern posturing that ended up with, you know, trending clothes shops starting to stock, you know, Motley Crue t-shirts. In fact, Motley Crue, I could lay the blame at so much wrong with modern metal with Motley Crue, right? Awful. Last night I thought, let's watch this biopic. Is that what you call music biopic? The Dirt. I thought, let's watch that. And within about 15 seconds, I switched it off and I thought, there we have the sort of modern Netflix version of what heavy metal is. All postmodern. We're supposed to like it because it's stupid, and we know it's stupid, right? The very first thing Motley Crue did is stood there like idiots and clowns saying we are idiots and clowns, and we all clap along. We're not the idiots and clowns. We can recognise it, and we will sit in it, and we will love it. But that's not what heavy metal is. Motley Crue, they're the worst of that sort of painted face, shallow hair metal that emerged in the 1980s. Now, some of that was good. Even some of Motley Crue stuff was good because it rocked and they managed to rock. That's not the issue here. What we're on about is the sort of purloining of metal by those artsy fartsy, you know, snotty types. And every time they get involved, and of course those artsy fartsy snotty types, they end up in the record companies and they're signing these bands and they're pushing these bands, and they basically try and create a space where the metal becomes some sort of, I don't know, tool to exploit middle class young men who feel annoyed that they've been born into privilege and comfort, and it would give them something to moan about as they sat in their huge bedrooms, you know, bemoaning the fact that their parents loved them. Right? And that could be probably most personified by the band Linkin Park. Motley Crue and Linkin Park. Those two bands have a lot to answer for. Anyway, I feel now, as we've hit 5 minutes, that I have said enough to introduce this and whet your appetite for the sort of drubbing that heavy metal's going to get. But I have to remind you with this video, I love heavy metal. Right. Number 10. At number 10, I have too many tattoos. I don't remember any of the Black Sabbath guys with tattoos. I think later on Ozzy Osbourne had a bit of a dragon on his arm. Got no problem with that. You know, Ozzy Osbourne come from a sort of working class Birmingham background, and those types did tend to get tattoos. The middle class end of the heavy metal, you know, personified by the likes of Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple, you wouldn't expect any of those to get tattoos, because tattoos were not the domain of heavy metal. Tattoos was the domain of sailors. When I was a kid, it was sailors and old men that had tattoos, right? And many a grandad I can remember sitting there and visiting of my friends who would sit there with these sort of vague green splodges up their arms that they got when they were in the Navy in the war, fighting for king and country. And they got these tattoos. But heavy metal had no, you know, it wasn't synonymous with tattoos back then. I don't remember UFO or Diamond Head or Iron Maiden or Angel Witch or any of those bands. Even bands like Raven and Venom, who bedecked themselves in all sorts of heavy metalry, still didn't go down the tattoo route. But over in Australia, and of course in Australia, they were a lot more, you know, working class, you know, descended from criminal types, and because of that, I think the Australians, I always associated Australians with tattoos. You know, maybe it was the sailors going over to Australia, and I don't know, but anyway, we had the band Rose Tattoo. Now, Rose Tattoo was the heavy metal band that had tattoos, because of course back then each heavy metal band would have to have its sort of trademark. It wasn't a trademark of heavy metal as such, it was just a trademark of that band. Venom were like into Satan. That was their trademark before everybody's decided they were into Satan. They were into Satan, do you see what I'm saying? And you could go through every single band and say, well, no, what was their trademark? What have they got going on, you know? And especially when you got to the minor league bands, that happened quite a lot, you know. Now, Rose Tattoo, as the name says, their trademark was tattoos, and they had lots of tattoos. And I can remember picking up issues of Kerrang and marvelling at their tattoos, but I didn't feel like I needed to get one to be heavy metal. Now, later on, the Red Hot Chili Peppers sort of come out, don't they? And everybody loves the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And the Red Hot Chili Peppers, old Anthony Kiedis, or Tony as I like to call him, old Tony Kiedis, he had that big eagle on his back, didn't he? And I had a band back then, and we were into the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and we had got a singer in called Mark. And Mark had been in, he'd been in a punk band. He was a bit too cool for metal. He'd been in one of them snotty punk bands, you know, the sort of types that the artsy fartsy liked, called House Gang. And he came in and sang for us for a while. But he also had a great big eagle tattoo. And I was very impressed by this. And the reason was because nobody had the tattoos. But with the Red Hot Chili Peppers, it sort of brought in this era of tattoos. And I remember it started up with the old Celtic band around the arm. That's where it started, quite innocent. And before you knew it, all the goths had had to get through grunge. They popped out the other side, and then you had these emos, these waif-like, you know, young teenage boys with their sort of slightly Hitler-esque postmodern 1980s haircuts, their makeup, and their arms covered in tattoos, beautiful tattoos, you know. Why did I not have a tattoo like that? Because I couldn't afford to get one. These literally cost thousands of pounds. It wasn't like, you know, somebody scraping the words Aussie onto their fingers. You know, it wasn't that type of tattoo. We were talking a lot of money, beautiful things, all sorts of dragons interviewed with flowers and all sorts of things were going on. And if I felt like there was nothing like a posh middle class boy getting into metal and showing his privilege and his antagonism to his middle class existence by spending thousands and thousands of pounds on tattoos. Now this has got to the point now where it's like de rigueur. You are now, you know, you are pushing the envelope out, yeah, pushing the envelope. Well, you're pushing the envelope by not having tattoos. You know, everyone has tattoos. And ladies have tattoos. Moms have tattoos. Grannies have tattoos. Grannies and granddads have tattoos. Everyone has tattoos. And not even metalers have tattoos. All the normal people have tattoos. I stand up in the shop holding my, you know, Battenberg cake in one hand and my Pringles in the other, and in front of me there's a whole bunch of people wearing sort of, you know, sports gear and asking to have loads of lottery tickets as they grab their white cider to go home to have a night in, eating pizza and scratching scratch cards. And they're covered in tattoos, usually the dates of people that they know who have died. They usually have those on the back of the neck or something like that. And now we have face tattoos, right? The first time I tore a face tattoo, I was in a very dodgy area in Warsaw. And I went to the chip shop and there was a bloke next to me and he'd got them tears coming down his eyes, and I thought, is that some sort of prison sign? Does that mean he's been in prison, or has he killed someone or something? I didn't know. You know, I tried to keep away from him as much as I can, but now they all have them. All those fat blubbery guys, don't they? You know, the sort of ones, you know, Rag and Bone Man and bloody all those types. You know, they've got the old face tattoos, haven't they? I suppose because without that, they'd look like big blubbing babies, wouldn't they? So, I think tattoos is one symptom of where metal's gone wrong, and now they've all got tattoos. You have to have a tattoo. If you're a metaler, you have to have tattoos. Got no problem with them having tattoos, but it is a sign of the bloody rot that's got into this wonderful genre. And I will be now going on to number 9 on the list. Right, and this one is much more specific and much more dodgy and dangerous than just having a few tattoos. At 9, I've got too much ironic post-modern posturing. Okay? In the 1980s, heavy metal sort of split into two avenues. It went down the thrash route, the dark route, and it allied with a whole bunch of sort of underground music. And those bands were almost cool, but not quite. Metallica was never cool amongst normal people, but it was dark and interesting. But the sort of area that Kiss and Van Halen had opened up was sort of party music, and a whole bunch of bands jumped in to basically just make good old rock and roll. Now, I wasn't much of a fan of it, but they existed. And they put on the show, it was all very vaudeville, you know, big hair, brightly coloured outfits, lots of sort of girls in the background and doing stuff, and lots of debauchery, lots of songs about girls and debauchery, you know, that's what it became, you know, and this is where your Motley Crues come from. Now, some of these bands, they happen to have some really great players in there, you know, and very many of them had a great guitar player. So us guys who weren't really into this sort of glammy hair metal could still appreciate a good George Lynch guitar solo, or maybe a Warren DeMartini guitar solo. There were so many great players, and I would buy these albums just for the guitar solos, really. But I knew it was a bit pap, you know, it wasn't Black Sabbath, and it wasn't Judas Priest, and it wasn't even Iron Maiden. It was a bit tacky, you know, and some bands were better than others. In 1980, when was it, 85, 86, Guns N' Roses came out, and they sort of made it a little bit cooler. But how? By having bloody really good riffs and great guitar solos. They did the thing that metal does, you know. I mean, the lyrics were nonsense, weren't they? You know, Sweet Child of Mine, Welcome to the Jungle. You know, there was no jungle in Guns N' Roses' world. They had nothing to do with the jungles, you know. They had about as much to do with the jungle as Jethro Tull did when they told us about their bungle that they had in the jungle, you know. So that's what it was. But then you have this sort of postmodernism. Now, what postmodernism does is all sorts of awful things. And anybody who knows who watches this channel is I'm not a big fan of postmodernism. But there's something about it where you can do this with postmodernism. There's a whole bunch of heavy philosophy, and it's all about the author and the lack of the author and how everything's social constructed, blah, 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 and all these sorts of things. And if you read your Roland Barthes and all that type of stuff, right, then you can do this sort of intellectual swizz on people. You can go like this. I'll try and do it now. I'm a very sophisticated person. I'm very intellectual, and I'm very aware, and I see things very deeply. And actually, I can go back to some of these art forms or music forms that seem very dodgy, and I can appreciate something about them. And not because there's some secret meaning. The people who made them are idiots. The people who like them are idiots. But there's something about it when you step back to it, which is quite ironic, isn't it? I am going to be so artsy-fartsy that I am going to gesture towards this thing, and I am going to show how clever I am by actually gesturing towards something which I believe is quite trite and silly. And so you will appreciate and snigger and smirk at how I know that this thing is trite and silly. And I am going to elevate it up in a way that will make me look good. I will be really, really cool. You know, I may go and buy a lava lamp, you know, and put it in my house, and people go, oh my God, that's quite kitsch, isn't it? I appreciate the kitsch, you know, I like the kitsch. I like all this cheesy, tacky stuff because I'm postmodern and ironic. And so at some point, after the hair metal bands had died, at some point, the artsy-fartsy types can see that there's currency in themselves pretending to be like that. Now, where does this come from? Spinal Tap, perhaps? Spinal Tap was a loads of intellectual artsy-fartsy types taking the mickey out of heavy metal, and they did it well. They nailed it. And so from that point on, we couldn't look at any heavy metal bands by going, oh my God, that's just like Led Zeppelin, that's just like Black Sabbath, that's just like this. Everything that's in Spinal Tap was real. It had happened to real bands. It was a work of genius. Here in the UK, we had Bad News, again, a bunch of lefty, you know, comedians that had gone to bloody Cambridge or something, come in, you know, pretending that they are like some dodgy 80s rock band, new wave of British heavy metal band. But this was genius. It was parody. It was great. And you laughed at the genre. I love the genre, and I go, I love the genre, but I can laugh at it as well. I can see how silly it is. I'm not a stupid person. I didn't really fall for it. I didn't fall for any of this, you know. You know, when I was really into Raven when I was a kid, I wasn't really into them, you know. I just, you know, I was though. I thought it was amazing. I was like, why don't all bands dress like that? Where's all the studded wristbands? Why can't they sing about fire and hell? And why can't they have all these fast bits? Why don't all the normal bands do this? I thought it was brilliant. Normal working class people, they didn't understand all this sort of weird artsy-fartsy posturing. They just wanted to have something that was heavy and took their face off and told stories. That's all they wanted, you know. It was straight down the line. But now the artsy-fartsy types, they come in. Spinal Tap. Here in the UK, we have Bad News. And then the bands start to follow in, you know. Now, one band that I feel opened the door to this, right, was The Darkness. Here in the UK, we had the band called The Darkness, and I never felt that they were a proper band, but they were a proper band. But they chose to accentuate the fun aspects, but it was funny. And then you had School of Rock, Tenacious D, you know, all this stuff. But The Darkness were a proper band. Now, The Darkness and that guy for The Darkness, I can't remember his name, the lead singer of The Darkness, Justin Hawkins, right? Justin Hawkins has now become a fellow music YouTuber like myself, and I'm a big fan of Justin Hawkins, the YouTuber. And I was quite a fan of The Darkness because they did it well. They were a proper band doing heavy metal, but there was a touch of irony about it. But I have to admit, Justin Hawkins now seems to be an authority on actual rock. People go to him to get his view of the world from an actual rock music. It's quite strange because they sort of opened the door for the hideous crime, which is Steel Panther and their ilk. Steel Panther should be banned. It's awful. All right, what Steel Panther is it's for classy people to appreciate how wonderful heavy metal is without them really feel like they're really dirtying themselves doing it. And this postmodern ironic posturing in heavy metal is awful. We either have bands that are too serious and too cool, or we have this postmodern ironic posturing, and it's stopped actual heavy metal bands forming. When Metallica formed in 1981 or whatever it was, they called themselves Metallica with no postmodern irony. They did tracks like Leper Messiah, and they had like stage sets that looked like the bloody, like the American Justice for All set. They did all the things that heavy metal, and they didn't do it postmodern. They believed in it. They believed in it and they lived in it. And they might not be the greatest metal band in the world, but because they truly believed in the values of heavy metal, they won out. They won out, right? And later on, they proved themselves to be the creative band that they are with their, collaborations with Lou Reed that I am a big fan of, and some of the later weirder albums, and I don't mind that at all. I expect my heavy metal bands to go off the rails at some point and make albums that nobody likes, because that's what a proper heavy metal band should do, because they should be open and creative. But this postmodern, posturing, right, belies the real power of heavy metal. Don't like it. So that's what I got at number 9. At number 8, I've got too much fake production. In the old days, what would happen is a band would form and they go, I play guitar, you play guitar, yeah, I play guitar. Well, we don't need another guitarist. Well, maybe we'll have 2 guitarists, because our mate's got 2 guitarists. Yeah, we need to have 2 guitarists, but my mate plays guitar. Well, can you play the bass? So then you got your bass player. Then you go to your show-offy mate that can get the girls and say, do you want to stand in front of the stage and sing? Well, I can't really sing. It doesn't matter. It's not about singing. It's about standing on stage and getting the girls. Can you? Yeah, I'll do that. I love showing off. So you got your singer, and then you go up to your mate that just can't do anything at all, and you say, can you play the drums? And if he flukes it and happens to be a decent drummer, you would then have a band. You would go to rehearsal every year, once a week, twice a week, and you'd write some riffs, rip off some metal bands that went before you, and before you know it, you were on the circuit playing. It was a wonderful thing. And the record companies would sign you up, they'd stick you in a room, and you'd play. Heavy metal was created by Black Sabbath in 12 hours. They went down to London on the way to a gig. They dropped into a recording studio, and 12 hours later, they had invented heavy metal. Then they buggered off and did the gig, okay? What you're hearing is a great metal band. As time went on, especially when the new wave of British heavy metal came out, we were seeing that bands, proper rocking bands, were hooking up with great producers like Mutt Lange, for example, and he would put a sheen on it that was fitting in sort of with this new MTV age that was emerging. And production became very, very important. And everybody now wants a certain guitar sound, they wanted a certain drum sound, And a great producer like Mr. Rick Beato, who I'm a big fan of course, but it has to be said that he made a living at a certain point by recording these types of bands, bring him into his studio and knowing all the right settings on his Pultec whatevers and his over here, and I put a bit of here, and they could get the sound, By the time we have the grunge thing coming out, those snare drums and bass drums are hearing are generic. It's not the sound of the band. They've been sort of done in the studio. Everyone's, dropping everything down bit by bit, and all this type of thing. And then the computers come out, don't they? And now you don't have to fight to get a good guitar sound. You can just plug into some sort of virtual amp. And if you go wrong, you can do it line by line. If you're a bit out of time, you can get it in time. Now, before you know it, nobody's playing on the records, right? And so you get a band like Judas Priest that in 1976 got Simon Phillips, one of the greatest drummers in the world, to come in, and he played on Dissident Aggressor, and he just took what Sabbath had done there, he pushed it up to there with his real drumming, his real double bass drum, and everyone wanted to play double bass drums like that, but it's hard to play double bass drums. And you got a computer now. Why not just program those double bass drums? We'll be coming back to this in a minute, and I will be going probably up the wall when I get to that. But over the whole thing overall, it's fake, right? I got to a point when I was working with the young metal bands where I was saying, right, you're great and you got some good songs. We now need to find a good producer, and then they basically got to rebuild the track up from the ground up with a load of fakery so that you will sound the same as every other band that's on heavy metal radio. Right? There is too much fake production. There is too much fakeness. There is no viscerality. There is no like bands playing together or having a certain sound which is cohesive. You know, whole thing about Def Leppard is Def Leppard sounding different to Iron Maiden. If you go back to those early Def Leppard albums, they have a certain sound, right? And it's different to Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden's different to Diamond Head. I'm on about the actual sound. I'm on about the drum sound and the way the drummers play and the way the guitarists play and the way the whole thing interacts, the way the singers sound. And we've lost that individuality by it being bleached out by modern digital audio workstation techniques, which everybody wants so bad because they're all competing against each other. And then in the race to be faster and louder and faster double bass drums and faster guitar solos, this sort of sheen and production has just gone over the top. I have never really recorded any heavy metal in my time as a musician, but a few years ago I joined what was to be one of the heaviest bands that I was in. It was like a prog metal band, and we got into a row because the guys in the band some of them wanted my drums to be completely quantized and completely triggered, and I wouldn't have it, and a row started up, and they decided to throw their toys out the pram, and we ended up in a band meeting. And I can remember I said, what do you want my drums to sound like? And they said, have you heard Evanescence? And I said, yes, if ever I'm in a band that sounds like that, I will leave the band. To which they sort of went quiet, and I left the band. At number 7, I've touched on this a little bit, too much moaning. Right? Ozzy used to moan, but what was he moaning about? He was moaning about bloody Iron Men coming and going bonkers, or he was moaning about like the world being destroyed by, you know, generals who have been gathering in their masses, a bit like witches at black masses, you know. And he was moaning, but at the same time, he was trying to rhyme masses with masses, wasn't he? And you have to give him that, you know. I mean, it might be a bit depressing, but also the fact that he's rhymed masses with masses, it does put a little bit of a smile on your face. The metalers moaned because they were telling these sort of, you know, depressing stories, like Hammer horror type stories or dystopian landscapes and all that type of stuff. That's what the metal bands did. They were like telling these terrible things, you know. Rob Alford's telling you what it's like to be the Ripper. Has he been Jack the Ripper? No, he means the Yorkshire Ripper. That's who's going around ripping at the time. It's all depressing stuff. And it's all exciting stuff, you know. I learned a lot of history, listened to proper heavy metal bands. They would tell you all about all sorts of different things, you know. Voyages to the North Pole in a balloon, you know. People trying to climb mountains. All sorts of things are incorporated. Lots on the war. I learned about the First World War, the Second World War. Saxon told me all about Kennedy's assassination, you know. They told me about all sorts of different things, you know. Judas Priest advised me how to break the law. And it wasn't much use. I did try their method. If you watch the Breaking the Law video, what they basically do is they jump into a bank while singing a heavy metal song, and they jump around on the tables, which sort of perturbs everybody. Then they don't know what to do, and then they simply walk up to the safe, and then through the power of rock, just playing the rock, the safe door just magically opens. I tried this, it didn't work, but then again, I can't rock like Judas Priest, you know. And of course, I am now indulging in a bit of postmodern mockery of the Judas Priest video in my old sort of. And this is what's ruined heavy metal, right? When Breaking the Law, when I first heard it in 1980 or whenever it was, when British Steel came out, I just loved it. I wasn't laughing at them. I was going, "Oh, how cool are they? They just bloody opened a safe with a guitar riff." There's too much moaning. You know who invented it? Bloody Nirvana. Soundgarden, all depressed, you know, like they've become Robert Smith, but heavy metal version of it. All moany, I don't like my life. I don't like what I had to do. I have to lie in bed in my big bedroom in my mum and dad's house, and we live in the suburbs. I don't like the suburbs. I have to go to school, and I don't quite fit in, you know, and everybody's cool, and I'm not a jock, you know, I'm just one of the outsider types, and I don't like it all, and I wish I was a drug addict, and I wish I was dead, you know, and all that type of thing, feeling sorry for yourself. Those bloody grunge artists, they all bloody ended up dead, didn't they? They got it made, millionaires, all of them. Chris Cornell, Kurt Cobain, bloke from Linkin Park, can't remember his name, bloke from, they're all of them, I think. The only ones left is Eddie Vedder, you know. I mean, what sort of world is that? It's like, they're moaning to him. I love Chris Cornell, I love Sam Cobain. He doesn't half moan, does he? He's so depressing. Black hole sun. Black hole sun. What's it about, Chris? Well, I've written this song because I'm a bit low. So what's your song about? Well, what it's about is it's like, I'm so depressed, and I look at everything, and it makes me so depressed that I wish that a black hole would enter our solar system and come into the solar system, go up against the sun, because you know how a black hole can go up against the sun. Right, I'll try and recreate this with my light. So that's the sun there, right? There's your sun, right? This is your black hole. It's my mouse. So that can come into the solar system, and it will come up and it will sit next to our sun and then suck the sun up, right? Creating a black hole sun, you see. That's what it does. And once that just eradicates everything. Black hole sun, won't you come? It's the greatest song ever written. I love it, but it is depressing. Black hole sun, won't you come? Wash away the rain. How can it wash away the rain? That's like a proper washing. This is more than just water washing. This is like sucked up into a bloody, you know, infinite bloody gravitational singularity. That's what this is, a different type of washing, isn't it, Chris? Wash away the rain, black hole sun, won't you come, won't you come? You know, and I think, oh, bloody hell, I mean, it's a cool song, and the riffs are brilliant, melodies, that's brilliant, but God, it's a bit depressing. And it sells millions of records, and before you know it, everybody's doing it, aren't they? They're all moaning, too much moaning. And the ones that really summed it up for me were Linkin Park. Linkin Park. At the same time, we had the other one. We had Linkin Park, and then we had the other one that's I've forgotten the name of, that did Rolling. What are they called, that one? What are they called? Rolling. I mean, you all go, how can you not remember? I'll probably, if I'll remember it in a minute. It's just, I have this. I blank out when I'm doing these videos. Now, the battery has fallen out of my mouse because I've used it as a black hole simulation. It's fallen a bit, so I can't even pretend the nonchalant. Oh, no, I can't get the battery in. I mean, these are real problems, isn't it? You never got Chris Cornell moaning about this. Maybe it was stuff like this that got into that. Come on, use your head. I can't look it up on the internet. See, the actual mouse on my laptop has bloody stopped working. Rolling song. I'm just gone blank. I know the name of this band. It's the Limp Bizkit, isn't it? Now, Limp Bizkit, everyone hated. I think they're way better than Linkin Park. They got better riffs. They're more fun. They jump around much. And they've got that weird guitarist who looks like a silver sort of Greek, what do they call satire? You know, and I like him because he's a bit weird. You know, and that's the sort of thing I like him better. So I like Limp Bizkit way more than Linkin Park. I'm worried about my mouse now. I've got to get this working again. I can't not have a mouse not working. Oh God, this is badly. When you see, I've lost the thing there, and when you poke it in, it'll probably. When I show you, it'll probably work now. But when you push it in there, that's working. But sometimes I need to pack that with something, and to get my mouse working. But I don't need it now, do I? Still not working. Why is it? Oh, look at the. Every time I slam it down, the battery comes out. These are real problems. You know, obviously, if I was a poshie, I could go, Dad, my mouse isn't working. He'd buy me a really, really good one, not the cheap one I've got there. I wouldn't have these problems. And you could still find something to moan about, wouldn't they? Right, I've lost my bloody list now. Did I close my list down? Oh, my God. I could edit all this out. But you love it all, don't you? You love it all when it goes a bit like this. YouTube ideas. Right, here we are. 10 reasons why I hate modern metal. So which one are we up to? Right, so we've just done 7, which is too much moaning. I'll get on because I'm covering a broader range of subjects. They get quicker as we go on because I've sort of explained it already. At number 6, I've got this. Thrash is boring. Now, when I was 12 years old, and I think everything had to be faster and bigger and better, you know, that type of thing, that's what kids like, you know. And say you want your metal fast, and back then you go, what's the fastest metal around? And it was weird because I was chatting about this with Martin Popoff, and he knows about heavy metal. And we were chatting about the fact that in 1980, when the new wave of British heavy metal came out, everything was getting faster, you know. And bands like Venom and Raven, they got this sort of double time thing that was like with, say, Deep Purple, because they were the ones who started this. They started it with the old Speed King. Now, for them, Speed King was going... stop ready. And that speed there, you speed up. Now you have this Motown. Then you go faster. And that's just sort of Angel Witch, dub bass drums. And so you get this faster and faster. But they were limited by what they could physically do. They were limited, okay? And so they would sort of reach a certain speed. Then the thrash metal bands come out, right? And so they're getting fast now, and the blast beat comes in, and we're all loving it. How fast can it go? How fast can it go, right? By the same token, you've got the singers. I mean, Robert Plant came out, he was singing really high, wasn't he? All that sort of... And they've all, you know, this is when James Brown is, you know, James Brown, you go and listen to him on Cold Sweat, and there's one point where James Brown just screams. He just is like going... like this. And so... You know, they don't realise they got this screaming from the bloody soul and blues singers anyway. That's by the by. So that starts to come into heavy metal. Who can scream? You know, Rob Halford comes out with this incredibly high piercing voice. You've got Ronnie James Dio. And the same things happen. So by the time you get to the 80s, away from all the hair metalers, you've got this thrash metal thing where everyone's trying to scream more and they're trying to play faster. That's what thrash is. It's faster. And then you get Napalm Death come out and, you know... At a certain point, I'm going, this is all great, you know, but really, I like a good riff. I like a good, dirty riff. And I like music, it's exciting, but when it gets too fast, it just becomes, like, abstract. You know, if you listen to, say, Iron Fist by Motorhead, I don't need to see it, invisible hands for that's exciting. I'm like, well, that's brilliant. And then he growls his way over it. It's all dirty and visceral. He's got the blues in there and it's fast. But what you get this down is, you know, all this is bloody nonsense. I don't mind a bit of it. I don't mind it. It's not like I'm an old bloke going, oh, I can't take all the screaming. I like free jazz. You want to hear screaming, then here's some free jazz, you know, but don't mind a bit of screaming. But it's just a certain point where this computerized screaming just gets boring. This stuff gets boring. All these drummers playing as fast as they can, all these very thin, wiry, sort of no friends drummers that you see. They've obviously just they're all pale because they've sat home playing using the most advanced jazz techniques, and they're just tickling the drums so they can get as fast as they can, doing these blast beats. They got triggers on everything so they can get it really, really fast, you know, and they sit there doing this, and we're supposed to go, ooh, that's really fast, that is. I've never been criticised anything being too fast. I'm not one of those people. I don't want to fall into that trap, but this just gets boring. And modern metal just falls into a pattern that just gets on my nerves. I don't mind anybody doing anything in music, but once everybody starts to do it, it's boring. Thrash metal, speed metal, whatever chord you want to call it, they've got all these different chords, speed chord, Black Death chord, whatever it is you want to call it, whatever core it is. Now, I'm friends with a man named Shane Embry, and he is the bass player with Napalm Death. Now, Napalm Death can play as fast and as short and as loud as they want because they did it. But once they did it, they then moved on and they did all sorts of different things, right? They've done all sorts of things. And Napalm Death, they know how to deliver a visceral rocking riff. They understand what heavy metal's about. And I can remember chatting to Shane, and he was saying, he goes, he says, I just want to play metal. He said, I love metal. And I said, yeah, but what is metal? And he said the best thing ever. He goes, well, it's the Scorpions. And it is. It's the Scorpions. Right. Number 5. Number 5 is, there's no long hair anymore. When did this happen? Right, you didn't have tattoos when you were a kid. When I was into metal, it wasn't tattoos. You might get a denim jacket, cut the arms off, fray the edges, ask your mum, how do I fray the denim edges? Your mum would show you, put some stitching in and pull it all out. And then you put that over your leather jacket, put your patches on the back. That is about all the ways this is what I would have done back in 1980. Stick your patches on the back, buy a load of badges, stick them on the front, get yourself, say, 7 heavy metal t-shirts that you can swap around through the day, put that on, 2 studded wristbands, studded belt, jeans, and cowboy boots, believe it or not. In my day, I had a pair of cowboy boots, which I got second hand, and they were a bit too small. I think they were lady cowboy boots, and so they sort of stunted my foot in the same way that the Chinese used to bind the lady Chinese feet. What are they called when those stumpy things? I always felt a little bit like tottering around with my black cowboy boots. So anyway, that was it. But the sign of being a metaler was having long hair, right? I can remember being around my friend's house and we were listening to Rainbow, Down to Earth, and we were quite horrified by Graham Bonnet's appearance, right? And I can remember going, God, doesn't he look terrible? Why he's got that white jacket on and that short? I mean, he shouldn't even be in a metal band, should he? Because we thought Rainbow were metal. What is he doing? He shouldn't be in a metal band. I mean, why is he in here? And we were very suspect of anybody that didn't have long hair that's in a metal band. You know that bloke that was in Saxon, the one? That was the bald head, and the moustache? He's in prison now. He's in prison, I'm not going to say what for, but our distrust of him back in 1980 was warranted, it seems. Anyway, I won't go into that anymore. You didn't trust anybody. And I can remember my friend pulled out Rainbow Rising, and I had Rainbow Rising in a double pack thing with the first Richie Blackmore's Rainbow album, but they got just Rainbow Rising with the gatefold in. And I can remember opening up the gatefold and seeing Ronnie James Dio, and I went, is that the lead singer of Rainbow? And they went, yeah. And I said, well, what's happened to him? Thinking that Ronnie James Dio was Graham Bonnet. And my friend said, they've obviously neatened themselves up a bit. That's how we thought. Now, long hair's got nothing to do with metal. Now, I'm going to tell you why. I'll tell you why, and I'm going to call it out. Metal, right, is now made by, on the whole, people who are about 40 years old. And these blokes, and they are blokes, they grow a beard, but they go bald. And so, in going bald, they can't go around like that bloke out of, Saxon, who thought he could get around his baldness just by putting a headband on and having them. No, it didn't work. It didn't work. Baldness, having a bald head. If you were a metaler in 1982 with a bald head, you would just give up. Some of them wore wigs. Richie Blackmore got a wig on, obviously, and I think Joe Linton. I think most of Rainbow wore wigs actually, and we didn't mind that. I didn't mind a bloke who was 50 years old looking like they got the hair of a 19-year-old lady, who probably somebody, from about 1978, all curls and shininess. I didn't mind that at all, because they got long hair. As long as they were putting in the effort, didn't really matter, did it? Now we've got these middle-aged blokes who have gone bald, and this idea that if you're bald you can still look okay because you shaved your head. So everybody shaves their head. When I was a kid, nobody shaved their head except for Yul Brynner, Kojak, and that bloke out of the Flying Pickets. I think that was it. And maybe the bloke out of Rose Tattoo. In fact, Rose Tattoo got a lot of answers for because he had it. Was it Angry Anderson? Was it? He got a bald head. Was it Angry Anderson? How can I remember that? Not Limp Bizkit. What's wrong with me? Anyway, so now they're all walking around it and they've got the tattoos up the arm, the beard, usually dyed a bit black, head shaved, bald. And then on the head, then they will put some sort of woolly hat. This woolly hat thing in heavy metal, so it's like this. It makes you look like a bloody, on a pirate ship, like the like Roger the cabin boy. That's what it looks like when you put. They all look like little pirates, don't they? And then you get the pirate's mate Shaolin monk look, where you can't grow a proper beard. I'm like this. I can't really grow beards here. So then my only option is to grow this bit down, but grow this into a great big long Shaolin monk thing. Put me woolly hat on, tattoos all up my arm, and that's what heavy metal is now. And now I don't want my heavy metal stars to look like that. I don't want them to look like that. I want them to look like Richie Blackmore, all dressed in black, a great big pilgrim's hat on, and long hair, even if it's not real. Right, what has happened to people? I don't know. So that was number 5. And number 4 is pretty boys and fashion victims. I noticed once I got a bit older that the generation after me, they were all going through a heavy metal phase, and when my kids... my older kids got to that heavy metal phase, I thought, oh, this is interesting. But they got into bloody Evanescence and things like this, And I was a bit suspect by it. So anyway, all these kids are getting into heavy metal. And the first thing they do is they don't go and buy Rainbow Rising, or British Steel, or Blackout by the Scorpions. They weren't buying any of these albums. I was always, have you Have you got Number of the Beast? Have you got any Iron Maiden? No. Well, what have you got? Oh, they showed me what they'd got. When they then get into heavy metal was the fact that they got and ordered this magazine thing, this like catalogue. And they showed me it. And on the front was all the spiky writing that now become de rigueur for heavy metal. And inside was all the heavy metal fashion. And then there was all these models, all pouty boys, all pasty and white, but very beautiful in a sort of vampiric way, And then these girls, all the same type of look, with all the face piercings and everything spiky. And they were buying all this stuff as though it had suddenly become cool to be a metaler if you were a teenager. It was suddenly cool to look like that. And it didn't look like it was. They become fashion victims. Metalers became fashion victims. Right? That bloke from Saxon, he might have had a bald head and a bandana around, and we might not have trusted him for it, but we tolerated it. Anybody could like heavy metal. In 1982, I went to see Motorhead at the Birmingham Odeon on their Iron Fist tour, the first gig I ever went to, and it was mainly looked like Hale's Angels to me. And I went with my Uncle Roger, and my Uncle Roger had like a sort of yellow tank top on and a shirt underneath and looked like just a normal bloke. I mean, my Uncle Roger could have handled himself if they had have tried it on with him, but that's another story. But he stood there quite happily with everybody, and everyone was okay with him, because the whole thing about heavy metal, it wasn't about fashion. Everybody was welcomed in. But now you have to be a pretty boy and a fashion victim. Now, I can remember interviewing when I was a music teacher. This kid had come and he was having the interview, and there he stood. He had spikes coming out of his face, all his long black shiny hair, makeup on all over him, ripped shirts, all the stuff. He was sat there, and I said, this is what we do in the course. We'll be teaching you harmony and production, how to play your instrument. And he goes, don't need any of that. Well, that's what we do here. No, I don't need any of that, not interested. I said, well, how are you going to work in the industry? I said, don't need it. I said, I'm doing heavy metal. I said, so? He says, yeah, well, I'm really good looking, so I'll get a deal. I didn't put him on the course. Another course took him. Turned out to be a pain in the arse, that kid. Right, number 3. At number 3, I've got catchy choruses. With this sort of heavy metal being put on the sort of commercial use, after the grunge, when Nirvana had sold millions and millions of records, and the record companies actually went, oh, maybe we can sell this to normal kids and not just all the weirdo kids. And they started to, and they pull out all these bloody bands like Korn and Limp Bizkit and Linkin Park, and there's a whole bunch of these bands, Machine Head, and all sorts of. Some of them are good, some of them I quite like Machine Head. You know, who else? Trivium. Do you remember them all? You know, the kids are all lapping it up. They're all lapping it up, aren't they? And I saw a pattern emerging. Is the problem with metal is you can't really put choruses. Choruses don't work in metal. Zeppelin knew this. Ozzy knew this. You can't have a chorus in heavy metal. If you put a chorus in heavy metal, it'll sound like this. These are crazy, 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 crazy nights. That's a chorus. Right? This is not a chorus. Generals gathered in their masses, just like witches at black masses. That's not a chorus. This is not a chorus. This is proper heavy metal like. Track starts. He was turned to steel in a great magnetic field. I mean, that's not a chorus. There's no hook there. He's singing the riff because the riff is the hook. He's saying that he was turned to steel in a great big magnetic field, which is not only nonsense, but is beautiful in its poetic silliness, you know, and doom it at the same time. A bit later on, he's going to travel time for the future of mankind. I am Iron Man. What's that does that? Is that a comb filter? What is that sound? Whatever that effect is, Rick Beato would know. Whatever that effect is, it's the greatest use of it ever, isn't it? I don't need. I've got a wobbly bit in my throat, so I can mimic that, which is why I'm doing it. I'm throwing everything into this video. You know, have I done this? You know, right? So what we've got now is we've got this music aimed at teenagers. Because rock music is not soul or funk, the choruses sound like the Eurovision Song Contest songs, basically, don't they? And so you get this horrible mix. You have a verse where they have to play fast and scream. So you get... And then, oh, it's a catchy chorus, everybody must sing along because it's a catchy. That's too much, isn't it? Oh, it's a catchy chorus, oh, must sing along. I'm going to scream in the middle bit, but now I'm doing a catchy song. And it's bloody nonsense, isn't it? Too many catchy choruses. At number 2, I've covered this already, but it really is the big reason why I hate modern metal. There's no bloody drummers on it anymore. The sounds are triggered, it's quantized, it's programmed, right? And the worst of it is, all that bloody 20 years of programmed drums that we had, all those impossible drum beats that were being pushed on kids, those kids listened to them, and now the world is full of these bloody overdeveloped kids playing metal that are so ridiculously fast because they thought it was humanly possible. It's a really strange experiment, right? The drummers can play like this now. This is the thing, and they're getting the gigs and they're doing it more and more, you know. But the truth is that when those guys go in, if you're Matt Garsker in Animals as Leaders, one of the most advanced technical drummers on the planet, right? If you're him and you can play it all, but still when he goes to the studio, they record it all and they re-trigger it and they quantize it and he does it all this and this and this. And I don't hear any reality. I hear there's nothing rocking. He doesn't rock anymore. There's no real drums on anything. It doesn't sound like natural. It doesn't sound like a real person. Ian Pace was a real person. Did Tommy Aldrich was a real person. Charlie Benante was a real. They were real. They were doing this stuff. That Anthrax drumming. When I've heard Among the Living, you know, when I first heard that, which I think was that album, I heard Charlie Benante's drumming. I couldn't believe what he was doing, but he was doing that for real. Everyone knocks Lars Ulrich, but when they did Master of Puppets, it might have been 1 million takes. He might have been able to only hold it together for 8 bars and had to cut it all together, whatever it was. But he is really playing it because they couldn't fake it back then, right? But Lars Ulrich has a certain groove, and then when it matches up with James and Kirk and Cliff Burton, right? That It's a magic sound to the band that sounds like nobody else. You know, Loz's big barky toms that he's got. You know, the whole sound is what make Metallica what they were. You know, it's like if the drummers were amazing. I loved them, and now I can't hear them. They've disappeared. Somebody told me, I don't know whether this is true, but Judas Priest, the drums are recorded on an electric drum kit. And then they just trigger the sounds because it's easier than trying to get a big rock sound. I hope that's not true. But it is, because I know it's true. I know metal producers and kids come in, they put the drums down, they're crap, and then the guy sits there and programs the drums afterwards and then plays it to the kid. And the kid walks out thinking that that's him playing. It's a big con. The whole thing's a con. Number 2, I've covered it already, but the worst bit of the fakery is the fake drums. Where's the real drums? So we get to number 1, don't we now? As I get into the last 5 minutes. At number 1, I've got this. Where's the blues gone? Where's the dirt? Where's the groove? The only time I see this is when somebody's doing some postmodern ironic posturing and they're never that good. Right? They're not AC/DC. The Einstein of the riff. Malcolm Young, Phil Rudd, Cliff Williams, Angus Young on lead guitar. AC/DC elevated it to an art form because they were a rock band, but they were dripping with the blues. They had dirt in there. There was dirt in the lyrics. There's dirt in the playing. And they had a groove. Please, metalers, go back to your Sabbath. Right? Go back to Paranoid. Go back to Hand of Doom or whichever one it is. And listen to it. And what do? They do this. I ain't going to play it because of copyright. I'm just going to sing it. Right? And if you know the album, you'll know what I'm about. This. What's this, Wu-Tang Clan? It's the heaviest funk thing you've ever heard in your life. It's the heaviest groove you've ever heard. Where's the groove, go metalers? Where's the groove? Bill Ward is like this big stone funky bloody funk drummer. You know, listen to the first album. What's that track? I can't remember what it's called. And it fades out just the drums. This is what the grungers got, you see. The grungers, bless them, they were great because they went back to that. You know, Jimmy Chamberlain, Matt Cameron, even Dave Grohl, they groove. They're groovers. They groove. You know, bam, 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 loud. That's why everyone loves Bonham. That's what they love. They groove. Right? All the hip-hoppers are sampling it. Right? That's why you had that heavy metal crossover, because all the rappers were listening to all this stuff and they loved the heavy groove. Heavier grooves than James Brown. James Brown was all like... That's great. I love all that. But no... Get in the blues. I got a bit of a boy. I'm on a nasty, dirty, nasty. Where's the dirt? Where's the blues? Where's the groove? Where is it in modern metal? Where is it? You know these people can't groove. You know they don't know what they don't know what dirty is. So now we're in a situation where you have to take a modern metal band, you have to take those and take them away, right? And put them through the process that will get them to be able to feel the blues, the dirt and the groove, the Holy Trinity. I will call it the Dirty Trinity. How do you do that? You go up to their hair and you mess it up, and then you get their face and you scrunch all their makeup up, right? Then you take them out at night and you get them off their head and you get them into some dodgy situation. Then you take all their clothes off and you drop them in the middle of nowhere. Then they have to make their way back whilst you've written on them, you know, something like bum buddy or something like that, something politically incorrect. And they have to go through that. They have to go through that sort of thing. And then they come out the other side looking a bit worse for wear, basically. And once you get that worse for wear look, then you can start to do a bit of heavy metal, you know. And the thing is that kids in the old days, they wanted that worse for wear look. We would naturally put ourselves into these situations. Kids do. And once you've done that a couple of times, then you know, you could maybe pick up a guitar and come up with something a bit dirty. You know, a bit dirty. Where's the dirt? I love the dirt. You know, I mean, that's the name of that film that Motley Crue did, didn't it? Because they ploined it all. Motley Crue, they don't bloody groove. They do a bit. They do a bit. Dr. Feelgood. I love that riff that opens up the album, Dr. Feelgood. You know that bit? I love that. I mean, it's immigrant song, innit? But who cares? The groove's gone. This is what is lacking. And when people try and do it, they think they got to go back. No, what we need is a seriously heavy, dirty groove back. Now, I'm sure they're out there. Please put them in the comments, because then people can come along and go, well, Andy doesn't know anything about modern music. He has made some, you know, reasonable criticisms of the genre of heavy metal, but he won't know any modern metal bands. And I'm sure there's loads of modern metal bands out in the sort of digital realm, you know, in this place where nobody's heard of the band except for about 200 people. That's enough to keep them going. You know, in this world, you know, this type of thing where no one else has heard of them. And I'm sure you're going to put up some really good visceral rocking bands. And I have to be honest, a few years ago, I did spend my time listening to various rock radio stations, and there was some great stuff around. There always is. I'm not doubting that. What I have been criticising a very specific thing that has ended up with us here right now. Right? You shouldn't have to be a virtuoso to play metal. You shouldn't have to be a pretty boy to play metal. It doesn't matter what you look like. You know, it doesn't matter what you look like. You know, you could look like Agent Smith if you want from Iron Maiden. No one's going to bat an eyelid. Okay? As long as you know how to write a riff, as long as you know how to get the dirt in there and get a groove going, I will always love that forever and ever. That's all I want from my metal. I don't want to pretend that I appreciate visceral rock by pointing at bands like Ramones or Neil Young or any of those bands I can't stick and pretending that they somehow are also proper rock bands. They're not. They don't rock. Right? It is a skill to know who rocks. And I'll tell you who rocks. AC/DC rock. Here in the UK, status quo rock. Maybe not in the last 40 years, but in the old days, they really rocked. Slade, another British band, they rock. They can rock. Right? Scorpions, UFO, Iron Maiden, Def Leppard. Anthrax, Metallica, Slayer, Rage Against the Machine, they can rock. Probably the last great, truly rocking band. They can rock. Audio Slave. Sometimes. They wear their Led Zeppelin on their sleeve. But my point is, I was a heavy metal fan, then got upset with this. But I am nearly at the end of it now. So we've hit the hour, and I am now just wittering on. That was my 10 things I hate about heavy metal. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm not in my studio, as you can see, because I've hurt my back doing a gig. I'm an old man, and I tried to play some heavy metal beats at the weekend, and I've come out worse for wear. Right, don't mess with the proper metal. I know how to do it, you know, but I sacrificed my back in doing it, and I have done, and I can't really stand up and walk around properly at the moment. And I'm okay. But I am in a bad way, so that's the way it is. Hopefully when these videos come out, because obviously my videos are sort of, they're a week ahead, if you know what I mean. I'll be back to normal. So you'll be all finding this out and going, oh, sorry, Andy, you've got a bad back, but hopefully I'll be better then. If I'm not, I'm in a bad way and have to go to the doctors and all that bit. So thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, put a like on it. If you want to see more, subscribe. If you want to become a patron, I have a Patreon. You can become a free member and you'll get a whole ton of content. But if you become a paid member, you will never, ever get to the back end of the content. It goes on and on and on and on. I don't even know what's there now. It's way more than what's here. It just goes on and on. A new thing here on YouTube is the memberships. I've got a few members now and I'm doing membership videos. You'll be able to see all the videos early and before everyone else sees them, and I do members content as well. I also have a PayPal tip jar. People have forgotten about that because I'm not saying so much about it, so that's diminished a little bit, and I use that for buying takeaways. And so if you could just stick a bit of money in the old PayPal tip jar, because I do enjoy curry on a Friday night and I'll be missing out on that. Might be why I've got a bad back. The spices haven't protected me from it. What else have I got? I've got my Bandcamp. Oh yes, and most importantly, I have, top of the links now, is my Elastistage page where you can buy vinyl albums and CDs of my own music, which is amazing. If you like me and you want to hear the musical equivalent of my YouTube videos, go and buy some albums. They're not funny though. I will be making, there was a few funny ones over at the old Bandcamp, but go and buy me a CD or an album. I've just put up on vinyl Black Corridor, which is an album I made 10 years ago, which was liked at the time. It did sell quite a lot of copies over on the old Bandcamp, you know, but I now have it on CD. I need to make a promo video for that. Thanks for watching. See ya. Bye. My motor car when I travel far in a lonely bar, in my bed at night when I'm out of sight, they call it fight or flight.